The summer sky over Savannah was not supposed to glow like that. It was close to midnight in August 1856 when the first screams split the heavy, salt-thick air. Flames licked up the side of Senator William Ashford's mansion, turning its white columns the color of fresh blood. Smoke rolled low over the manicured lawns and marble fountains, as if the city itself were choking on its own sins. In the courtyard, chaos reigned. Servants ran with buckets that did nothing against the roaring fire. Ladies in silk gowns stumbled through the garden, their skirts blackening at the edges. Men shouted orders no one obeyed. Above it all, the great crystal chandelier in the ballroom crashed down in a shower of glass and sparks, as if heaven had hurled judgment straight through the roof. At the center of the courtyard, beneath a magnolia tree now spattered with embers, a young man knelt in chains. Gabriel's wrists were bound behind his back, iron cutting into his skin. His bare chest was streaked with soot and blood, his lips split from earlier blows. But his back was straight, his gaze unbroken. Even kneeling, he refused to slump like a beaten animal. Before him, Senator Ashford stood with his pistol drawn, coat half-buttoned, hair wild, face twisted by a rage that had long ago consumed whatever soul he'd once possessed. "You did this," the senator hissed over the roar of the fire. "You set my house, my life, my name on fire. You corrupted my wife. You stole what was mine." Behind him, on the terrace, Catherine clung to the wrought iron railing, nightgown torn, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes shining wet in the firelight. Her hands lay protectively over the slight swell of her belly. "Don't you touch him!" she cried, voice raw. "If you kill him, you kill your own child too." The courtyard fell silent. Even the flames seemed to bend closer. Ashford's hand shook on the pistol. His gaze flicked from Gabriel's steady eyes to Catherine's trembling form, to the inferno devouring the house that had once been his pride. Somewhere in that moment, a choice was made, a choice that would burn down more than wood and plaster, a choice that would scorch Savannah's memory for generations. Narrator? Before we dive deeper into this merciless verdict of conscience, I want to know who is walking beside me tonight. From which city or country are you listening to this story? Leave a comment below and let me know. Long before the flames painted the sky red, Savannah burned in quieter ways. By day, the Ashford mansion was the pride of Oglethorpe Avenue, a grand white structure set back from the street behind a wrought iron fence twined with jasmine. Live oaks arched over the cobblestones outside, their heavy branches draped in Spanish moss that swayed lazily in the humid air. Horse-drawn carriages rolled past the shaded squares, where fountains tossed water into the heat, and wealthy ladies pretended not to notice the auction block down by the river. Savannah prided itself on being more refined than the rougher plantation country further inland. There were bookshops and theaters, and a growing cotton exchange where fortunes were counted in bales and human lives. But under the perfume of orange blossoms and imported French soap, the same old rot lived on. Chains, whips, and the quiet knowledge that the city's elegance was built on backs that were never paid. The Ashford estate was a perfect distillation of that contradiction. Inside, crystal chandeliers glowed over polished parquet floors. Marble busts of Roman senators watched from their niches as real American politicians drank brandy below them and discussed tariffs, secession, and how far a civilized society could go to protect its way of life. Portraits of Ashford ancestors lined the walls, stern men in powdered wigs, unsmiling women in brocade gowns, each one a reminder that this house was not just a home, but a dynasty. In that world, Catherine Marie Ashford was meant to be the crown jewel. At 16, she had been the most admired belle at every Savannah ball, her beauty already the subject of whispers and comparisons. Her hair was a soft, burnished gold that caught candlelight like flame. Her eyes were a sea-glass blue that seemed to change with the weather. Her figure was slender but not fragile. her laugh musical, her dance steps effortless. Mothers pushed their sons toward her like offerings at an altar. When Senator William Ashford, already a powerful lawyer on his way to Washington, took an interest, everyone agreed it was a match made in heaven. He was nearly 20 years older, but that only added to the sense of security. A girl could do worse, they said, than to marry a man whose name could open any door from Savannah to the Capitol. No one asked Catherine what she wanted. 10 years later, the Mirror told a different story. She was still beautiful, perhaps even more so. The childish roundness had left her face, leaving high cheekbones and a delicate jaw that lent her an almost classical grace. Fine lines had begun to form at the corners of her eyes. Not from laughter, but from squinting against tears she refused to shed in public. Her waist was still trim, her posture impeccable, her gowns the envy of every woman in town. But her eyes, those famous sea-glass eyes, had dimmed. They were no longer the eyes of a girl who believed the world might offer her something like joy. They were the eyes of a woman who had learned that her feelings were an inconvenience, her questions an irritation, her body a possession. William Ashford was a man who knew how to fill a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair that gave him an air of distinguished authority, he had the smooth voice of a practiced orator and the smile of someone who understood the value of charm. On the Senate floor, he spoke of states' rights and constitutional principles. At home, his word was law in a more immediate sense. He was not the sort of brute who left visible bruises. His cruelty was more elegant than that. He controlled Catherine's hours, her acquaintances, her movements. He decided which letters from her family she would see, which invitations she would accept, which charities she would support as proof of her delicate Christian heart. When she attempted to express an opinion on politics, he laughed and told her not to strain herself. When she suggested visiting one of the city's poorer parishes to see the conditions firsthand, he accused her of seeking attention. "You exist to reflect my success, Catherine," he told her once, in a low voice that never needed to rise to be dangerous. Not to question it. So she learned to smile on command. She hosted dinners with perfect grace, remembering every guest's favorite drink, every politician's pet cause. She stood on his arm at rallies, her presence softening his sharpest words. She played piano when guests requested it, choosing pieces that pleased without provoking. She walked through the city in gowns he approved, nodding graciously to women who envied her and men who envied him. And inside, the part of her that had once laughed freely and dreamed of things beyond ballrooms and parlors slowly suffocated. She found her only true respite at the edges of things, on balconies at the edge of parties, in the garden at dusk when the last light peeled itself from the sky, in the music room after midnight when everyone else had gone to bed. In those liminal spaces, she could let her shoulders drop, let her face relax, let her fingers find melodies that said all the things she could not. It was in one of those spaces that she first saw him clearly. Gabriel arrived at the Ashford household in June, a month before the anniversary ball. He came up from the docks in a small group of newly purchased slaves, wrists shackled, eyes lowered as custom demanded. The bill of sale described him in cold, efficient language. Male, approximately 20 years of age, sound, literate, trained in domestic service and light music. To Senator Ashford, he was an asset. A rare find, the seller had boasted. House-trained, discreet, can serve at table and entertain at the piano. Perfect for a man of your position, Senator, a civilizing influence for your gatherings. To the overseers, he was a problem waiting to happen. Leonard, the head overseer, watched Gabriel step off the wagon with narrowed eyes. The young man was tall, near 6'2", with shoulders that promised strength but a bearing that did not match the usual beaten slump. His skin was a deep, warm brown, his features sharply cut, his hands large but graceful. Even in coarse clothing and chains, there was a certain unshakable poise about him, as if some inner axis kept him upright no matter how the world tilted. His eyes, when they lifted briefly from the ground, were startling. They were not dull with resignation. They were bright, alert, assessing. The eyes of a man who missed nothing, who recorded everything, who refused to let his mind be chained even if his body was. Leonard didn't like that. He liked his slave simple, afraid, obedient, careful not to think too much. Men like Gabriel, with their quiet intelligence and unbroken gaze, made overseers nervous. Men like Gabriel remembered. Men like Gabriel compared. "Keep that one inside," Leonard muttered to the steward after the purchase. "If you put him in the fields, he'll have half the place whispering before the harvest. Centaur wants him polished? Fine, but I'll be watching him." Inside the house, the steward measured Gabriel for livery, tested his understanding of basic protocols, and quickly confirmed what the bill of sale had suggested. The boy was indeed literate, and more than just competent with music. "Play something simple," the steward instructed that first afternoon, gesturing toward the polished piano in the drawing room. Gabriel hesitated, clearly aware of the line he was crossing. A slave's hands were meant to grip tools and trays, not ivory keys reserved for the leisure of the powerful. But orders were orders. He sat carefully, back straight, fingers hovering above the keyboard. He played a hymn. It was one Catherine knew well, one she had played countless times in church and at home. But under Gabriel's fingers, it sounded different. Less polished, perhaps, but more alive. He allowed pauses where the printed notes did not, as if hearing a second melody woven beneath the first. There was an ache in the way he lingered on certain chords, a reaching in the slight variations he dared. A maid listening from the doorway felt tears prick her eyes and quickly wiped them away before anyone saw. Later, when Catherine's old housemaid whispered, "They say the senator bought a new house servant who can read and play," Catherine only nodded, as if it were a trivial detail. "A useful novelty for his guests," she said lightly. But that night, standing alone on the balcony above the lantern-lit garden, she found herself scanning the shadows below for a tall figure in livery. When her gaze finally caught him moving through the crowd with a silver tray balanced in one steady hand, something inside her stirred, a small, sharp jolt like the first crack of distant thunder. She did not know it yet, but in that moment, two different prisons had seen each other for the first time. One built of iron and law, the other built of lace and expectation. And the man inside one cage and the woman inside the other both felt, for a heartbeat, the same terrible, intoxicating thing. Possibility. The day it happened began with heat so thick it felt like punishment. Savannah summers had always been merciless, but that afternoon in July 1856 seemed intent on proving a point. The sun pressed down through the magnolia canopy as if trying to flatten the world itself. Cicadas rattled like distant bones. Even the horses in the stable refused to move without protest. Catherine felt the familiar weight of the season as she walked across the veranda toward the great stairway leading down to the garden. She wore a pale blue day dress, the fabric stuck to her spine no matter how slowly she moved. A parasol shaded her head, but nothing could cool the oppressive heat. She had retreated outdoors only because the mansion interior felt worse, full of political men roaring about tariffs and unity while sipping brandy in her parlor. Her husband had commanded her presence earlier, but after an hour of pretending to be interested in discussions she had heard 100 times before, she excused herself with a claim of faintness. Faintness was one of the few freedoms allowed to women in her world. She descended the marble steps carefully, avoiding the cracks where rainwater often gathered after storms. She was halfway down when she heard a shout, "Ma'am, stop!" She turned, and her foot slipped. The step beneath her had been baking all morning, and a thin layer of moisture from overnight dew still clung to the polished surface. Her heels skidded. Her parasol flew from her hand. She pitched backward with a cry she didn't have time to finish, but she didn't hit the ground. Arms caught her, strong, steady, impossibly quick. One hand braced her back, the other wrapped around her waist. Her fall halted so abruptly she gasped, hands instinctively grabbing the shirt front of the man who had caught her. Gabriel. For a moment, neither moved. Her chest was pressed to his, breaths mingling in the thick air. His skin smelled faintly of soap and cedar. Sweat glistened along his neck and temples, catching the sunlight. His heartbeat thudded against her palms, a wild, terrified human sound. He had dropped the stack of linens he'd been carrying. They lay scattered around them like fallen feathers. Are you hurt, ma'am?" Gabriel asked softly, his voice deeper than she remembered. He didn't look away. He didn't dare move either. Catherine tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. I don't—" She swallowed. "You saved me." He released her slowly, as if afraid she might break if he moved too quickly. Once she stood steady on her own feet, he stepped back with disciplined control, lowering his gaze. Not in fear, she realized, but in respect. Still, the air between them hummed with something neither of them had the language to name. "Thank you," she said, breathless. "If you hadn't, I only did what any man would do," he answered. Any man, not any slave. The word hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. Before Catherine could find a reply, before she could even gather her scattered thoughts, another sound cracked across the garden. A whistle. Sharp. Angry. Overseer Leonard strode toward them, whip coiled in hand, jaw clenched tight enough to crack his teeth. He had seen everything. "What's going on here?" Leonard barked. "You touching the mistress, boy?" Catherine's heart lurched. Gabriel stiffened but did not cower. His hands remained at his sides. His posture stayed straight. He didn't answer, not out of defiance, she realized, but because anything he said would damn him. "He didn't touch me improperly," she said quickly, stepping forward. "I slipped. He caught me. That is all." Leonard narrowed his eyes at her. Then at Gabriel, suspicion simmering just beneath the surface. "A slave ain't to lay hands on a lady, accident or not," Leonard growled. "Are you questioning my word?" Catherine's voice sharpened. It surprised even herself. Leonard hesitated. There it was, the thin, brittle shield of what little power she possessed. "No, ma'am," he muttered, "just making sure the centaur don't hear something. Misinterpreted." Misinterpreted. Catherine felt the insult beneath the word like a sting. "That will be all," she said coldly, "and have someone clean these linens." She turned sharply and walked back toward the house, pulse racing, breath shaky. But after a few steps, she made the mistake of glancing back. Gabriel stood where she'd left him, shoulders squared, eyes lifted, not in challenge, not in fear, but in something far more dangerous. Recognition. The silent acknowledgement that something had happened between them, something neither had meant, something neither knew how to undo. Behind him, Leonard watched them both with eyes narrowed to slits. A boundary had been crossed, a line disturbed, a spark lit, and sparks, Catherine would soon learn, had a way of finding kindling. The slip on the steps should have been nothing. A momentary accident swallowed by the routines of a southern household. Catherine told herself that as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. She told herself it meant nothing. She repeated it as if repetition alone could smother the memory. But memory had a will of its own. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt again the sudden halt of gravity, the strength of arms around her, the warmth of Gabriel's chest against her own, the steadiness of him, the way he had held her, not as a servant frightened of punishment, but as a man saving a woman, with instinct rather than calculation. No man had touched her with such intention in years. William's hands were cold, methodical, claiming, never comforting. Gabriel's hands had been something else entirely. She turned in her bed, restless, the sheets tangled around her legs. Outside, the garden cicadas droned through the night, an endless faltering chorus. Downstairs, in the slave quarters, Gabriel lay awake as well. He stared at the low ceiling, hands folded over his chest, listening to the soft breathing of the men around him. The night air hung heavy with sweat and humidity, but it wasn't the heat that kept him awake. It was her. When Catherine fell, time had slowed. She was a vision in pale blue and sunlight, falling backward with a soft cry. His body moved before thought, before fear, his arms reaching out to catch her. When her palms pressed into his chest, something inside him had shifted, dislodged, awakened. He had seen white women before. He had served them, poured drinks for them, kept his eyes lowered in the presence of their jewels and perfumes. They were distant constellations he'd been told to admire, but never reach. Catherine had not been distant. She had been inches from him, close enough for him to smell roses in her hair, close enough to see the faint freckles on her cheekbones, close enough to feel her heart racing against his ribcage. He should have looked away, should have stepped back as soon as she steadied, should have remembered the iron laws of his existence. But he had met her eyes, and in those blue eyes he saw, if only for a heartbeat, a loneliness that mirrored his own. A loneliness so vast it seemed impossible for a woman like her to possess. That was the danger. That was the hook that lodged itself in him. He closed his eyes and exhaled, trying to will her image from his mind, but it did not leave. Nor did the memory of Overseer Leonard's stare, cold, sharp, hungry for an excuse. Leonard would not forget. Men like him never did. The next morning, Catherine forced herself to regain her composure. She spent hours at her vanity, allowing her maid to pin her hair with pearls, powder her cheeks, and fasten delicate gold earrings. She tried to appear unchanged, unshaken, untouchable, the perfect senator's wife. But her reflection betrayed her. There was a flush in her cheeks that rouge could not hide, a brightness in her eyes she did not invite, a tremor in her breath when she recalled the feel of Gabriel's hands. She dismissed the maid early, claiming a headache. She needed solitude, space to quiet the chaos inside her. Instead, she found herself drifting toward the music room. The piano waited in the corner, silent, gleaming, expectant. She sat before it and let her fingers hover above the keys. Music had always been her refuge, but this morning each note felt heavy with the memory of another pair of hands playing the same keys in a way she had never imagined possible. Her fingers finally pressed a chord, soft, slow, yearning. She closed her eyes. The door opened behind her. She froze. No one entered the music room without knocking, not servants, not even William. It was a sanctuary meant only for show. Her breath caught when she heard the voice. "Ma'am?" She turned. Gabriel stood in the doorway, hat in hand, linen shirt freshly laundered, posture respectful. He was breathing slightly faster than normal. He had clearly hurried here. She gripped the edge of the piano to still her pulse. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "The steward sent me to bring the morning letters," he said, stepping forward. His eyes flicked briefly to the piano, then back to her. He lowered his gaze in the manner expected of him. "May I place them on the table?" "Yes," she said, though the word came out softer than intended. He walked to the desk with quiet precision, every movement controlled, but Catherine saw the faint tightness in his jaw, the effort it took for him not to look at her. "I want to thank you," she said. He stopped. "For catching me," she clarified. He turned slightly, hands clasped behind his back. "It was nothing, ma'am." "It was not nothing," she said, standing despite herself. "I would have been seriously hurt." He shook his head. "I did only what I hope any man would do." There it was again. Any man. Not any slave. She took a step toward him. "Gabriel," she said quietly. He stiffened, not at his name, but at her saying it aloud. A white woman saying a slave's name in private was not done, not unless... He didn't finish the thought. He couldn't allow himself to. "Ma'am," he said, voice lower, firmer, protecting both of them. "Please don't address me as..." "As what?" she asked, a faint tremor in her voice. "As a man. Is that what terrifies you?" He lifted his eyes to hers, only for a moment, but it was enough to shatter the final defenses they had both tried to rebuild. "You should not speak this way to me," he said quietly. "It is dangerous." "For whom?" Catherine whispered. "For you, or for me?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She took another step. He took one back, stopping only when his heel touched the rug. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about yesterday," she confessed, voice trembling. "Not because you saved me, but because of the way you looked at me afterward." He closed his eyes, pained. "Ma'am, please." "You looked at me like I was human," she continued. "Not a senator's wife, not an ornament, just a woman." Gabriel swallowed hard. His voice was barely audible. "You are a woman." She took a breath that felt like a plunge into cold water. "And you are a man," she said. He jolted, as if slapped by the truth of it. Silence stretched between them, thick, dangerous, electric. The piano stood behind her. The letters trembled on the desk. The world outside moved on without noticing that something irreversible was happening in one quiet, sunlit room. Finally, Gabriel spoke. "You must not think of me this way," he said. "If anyone knew, no one will," she said. "You cannot promise that." She stepped closer. "Then tell me to leave," she whispered. "Tell me never to speak to you again, and I will." He remained still. She waited. The silence answered for him. When she finally turned and walked past him, heart pounding, breath quivering, he remained frozen in place, every muscle locked in a war he had no hope of winning. Over the next week, fate found ways to push them together. At first by accident, then by habit, then by want. Catherine found herself lingering in rooms she normally crossed without pause, watching for a glimpse of Gabriel's tall figure, listening for the quiet sound of his footsteps, the rustle of linens in his arms, the low cadence of his voice when answering a steward's question. Gabriel tried to avoid her, but the estate was a maze of intersecting duties. His path inevitably crossed hers in doorways, hallways, the garden, the veranda. Each meeting was brief. Each meeting was dangerous. Each meeting fed the growing fire neither dared name. One evening she found him arranging flowers in the parlor. For a dinner she had no interest in hosting. "Those peonies, put them in the tall vase," she said, stepping into the room. "Yes, ma'am," he replied without looking up. His hands were gentle with the flowers, arranging them with a care that hinted at an artistic eye. She watched the way his fingers moved, steady and precise. "You handle everything with such skill," she said. He froze. "I do only what is expected." "That isn't true." She stepped closer. "You do more." He didn't turn, but she saw the tension ripple through his shoulders. "If anyone saw you speaking to me like this..." "I don't care," she whispered. He turned then, sharply. "You must care. You must." Her breath caught because he wasn't angry. He was afraid. For her. Something warm unfurled in her chest, terrifying and exhilarating. "You fear for me?" she asked softly. He hesitated. Then, helplessly, "Yes." She felt the world tilt. The walls, the flowers, the polished floors. They all faded, leaving only him. Only the man who had caught her. Only the man who saw her. "Gabriel," she breathed. He stepped back as if burned. "Please," he said. "Don't say my name like that." "Why?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. Because it breaks me, he whispered. The honesty of it stole her breath. She lowered her gaze, trying to regain control. You may go, she said. But when he walked past her, the brush of air that followed him made her close her eyes in helpless longing. The night everything changed was a storm night. Thunder cracked over Savannah. Sheets of rain hammered the mansion roof. Catherine lay awake, heart pounding, not from fear of the storm, but from the storm inside her. She rose from bed, unable to remain still. Her feet led her down the hallway, down the stairs, to the music room. She lit a single candle. The flame flickered wildly in the drafts. The room felt alive, trembling, waiting. She sat at the piano and began to play, not one of the polite pieces society expected of her. A darker melody, a yearning one. Notes that spoke of desire, fear, loneliness, hope. Halfway through, she sensed movement. She didn't turn. Gabriel, she whispered. He stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, shirt clinging to his chest, breath unsteady. He must have been returning from stables duty when he heard the music. I shouldn't be here, he said, voice rough. I know, she said, still playing. This is dangerous. I know. The music swelled, soft, aching, irresistible. He took one step into the room. Stop, he said, voice cracking. Please stop playing. Why? She whispered. Because I can't walk away when you play like that. She stopped. The silence was thunderous. He breathed like a man drowning. She rose from the bench, candlelight trembling across her face. Then don't walk away, she said. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched. Because if I don't... His voice broke. If I don't walk away, I will sin, ma'am. And if you do walk away, she whispered, stepping closer, I will die. He opened his eyes. Lightning flashed. He was undone. Catherine, he breathed, breaking the boundary with her name. She reached for him. He caught her wrists, not to reject her, but to steady himself. Please, he said, voice cracked open. Tell me to leave. I can't. Tell me this is madness. It is, he trembled. Tell me this is wrong. It is, she whispered. But tell me you want me, he begged, voice raw with a decade of silence and submission and longing. She placed his hand over her heart. It's yours, she said. He collapsed against her in a shuddering breath. Their lips met. A kiss that felt like sacrilege. A kiss that felt like salvation. A kiss that felt like fire. When he lifted her into his arms, she did not resist. When he carried her to the chaise, she did not tremble with fear, only with need. When he touched her, it was with reverence, as if she were something holy. And when she touched him, it was with hunger, as if she had lived her whole life starved. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two people who were never meant to touch held each other as if anchoring themselves to the only truth the world had ever denied them. Love. Forbidden. Impossible. Unstoppable. And once awakened, it would not be silenced. By the end of August, Savannah's heat turned oppressive enough to make tempers rise and secrets sweat through the cracks of even the most careful households. And the Ashford mansion, polished, perfumed, perfectly controlled, had begun to vibrate with tension Catherine could feel in her bones. Forbidden love was a fragile thing. It did not take long for the world to smell it. At first, the danger appeared in small, almost invisible ways. A maid paused too long when bringing tea. A footman glanced curiously when Gabriel and Catherine crossed paths in the hallway. A window curtain moved when neither of them had touched it. But worst of all was Overseer Leonard. He had not forgotten the incident on the steps. And since that day, he watched Gabriel with the cold patience of a man who enjoyed waiting for someone to hang by their own rope. Sometimes Catherine would turn a corner and find Leonard standing too still, too quiet, eyes following Gabriel like a vulture circling a dying animal. And Gabriel felt it. He grew more cautious, always positioning himself 3 steps behind her, never speaking unless spoken to, taking longer routes to avoid passing her directly. His head bowed lower, his movements sharpened with self-discipline, yet the nights were their undoing. After everyone slept, Catherine lit a single candle in the music room, their signal. If Gabriel saw its faint glow from across the yard, he knew the house was quiet. He knew she longed for him. Sometimes he hesitated. Sometimes he stood in the shadow of the live oak, fists trembling, breathing hard with the war inside him. But he always came. Those nights were quieter, hungrier. They did not speak as much as before. Words had become too dangerous. Instead, they memorized each other with fingertips and whispered breaths. They clung to each other like 2 people suspended in a world meant to crush them. Yet even in passion, fear gnawed its way between their ribs. One night, Catherine pulled away mid-kiss, trembling. "Gabriel, what if someone discovers us?" He touched her cheek gently. "Then I die," he said simply. "And they call you a disgrace." Her breath broke. "Don't say that." "It is truth," he whispered. "Love like ours does not get forgiven in this place." She pressed her forehead to his chest, heart pounding. "Then we must be careful. We must be miracles," he corrected softly. But careful or miraculous, fate was tightening its grip. The crisis began one sweltering afternoon when Catherine found herself cornered, literally, by Senator Ashford's older sister, Marjorie Collins. A woman sharp as vinegar and twice as bitter, Marjorie had come from Charleston for an extended visit. She was known for 3 things: piercing stares, malicious gossip, and the uncanny ability to know when something was amiss. Catherine was arranging flowers in the front parlor when Marjorie glided in like a snake disguised in lace. "My dear Catherine," she began in a voice sweetened with poison, "you look flushed. Are you unwell, or has something stirred your spirits lately?" Catherine froze, fingers tightening around a stem of roses. "I'm perfectly fine, Marjorie." "Oh, I'm not so sure." Marjorie moved closer, studying every twitch of Catherine's face. "Rumors have reached my ears. Strange things, improper things." Cold washed over Catherine's spine. "Rumors about what?" she asked, forcing her tone to remain even. Marjorie smiled, a slow, knowing curl. "About who is seen coming and going in certain parts of the house late at night." Catherine's stomach dropped. Before she could respond, Leonard appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am," he said to Marjorie. "Not Catherine. I have business to discuss with you about new security protocols the senator requested." Marjorie's eyebrows arched. "Oh? Security? How fascinating." Leonard's gaze flicked toward Catherine just for a fraction of a second, and Catherine understood. They were watching her. They were watching him. The circle was closing. That night, Gabriel did not come to the music room. Catherine waited by the candle for nearly an hour, mind racing with dread. Finally, she extinguished the flame and slipped barefoot down the back stairs, heart pounding as she stepped into the garden. She found him beneath the magnolia tree where they had first locked eyes weeks ago. He was pacing. "Gabriel," she whispered urgently. "Why didn't you come?" He turned, anguish carved across his face. "Catherine, we are not safe. Leonard has been following me. He knows something." Her throat tightened. "What did he say?" "He hasn't said anything yet," Gabriel replied. "But today, he sent 2 guards to search my quarters. They claimed they were looking for stolen goods." Her knees weakened. "Did they find anything?" "No," he said. "There is nothing for them to find." But they were not searching for objects. They were searching for a reason. Her breath came shallow. "Then we must stop. End this. End us. For your safety. Gabriel's face twisted. End us, after all we've risked, after what we are to each other. Tears welled in her eyes. I would rather lose you by choice than watch them take you from me in chains. He stepped forward and took her trembling hands. You will never lose me by choice, he said softly, and I will not let them dictate the ending of our story. But they are closing in, she whispered. I can feel it. So can I, Gabriel admitted. Leonard is circling. The senator is watching. Your husband's sister sees too much. Every hour, the noose tightens. Then what do we do? He held her gaze, full of fear, full of fire. We think, he said. Before they move against us, we move first. Lightning flickered on the horizon. A coming storm, and they had no illusions. Their love was now a ticking clock. One misstep, one whisper, one shadow at the wrong moment. And Gabriel would hang. The storm broke 3 nights later. Not the kind that rumbled politely over the sea. Savannah knew those well, but the kind that split the sky and cleaved the earth, the kind that rattled shutters and made horses rear in terror. Lightning flashed in jagged white scars across the heavens, and thunder shook the Ashford mansion down to its foundations. Inside, the halls flickered with unstable candlelight. Servants hurried to secure windows. The scent of rain and danger seeped through every crack in the grand house. Catherine felt it before anyone said a word. Something had shifted. Something had snapped. She was in her bedroom preparing for sleep when Sarah, the only maid she trusted, burst in without knocking. "Miss Catherine," Sarah whispered, eyes wide with fear, "you need to come with me right now." Catherine's stomach dropped. What happened? "It's Gabriel," Sarah said. "Leonard's got him. Says he caught him sneaking to the music room. Says you've been meeting him there." Catherine froze. Her heartbeat slammed into her ribs so hard she thought it might burst. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." She rushed past Sarah, tearing down the hallway barefoot, her nightgown whispering behind her like a ghost. She didn't care who saw. She didn't care what they would think. She only thought of Gabriel, alone, surrounded, defenseless. The closer she came to the main staircase, the louder the shouting grew. By the time she reached the foyer, lightning illuminated a nightmare. Gabriel stood in the center of the marble floor, wrists bound behind him, shirt torn from a struggle. His lip bled. A bruise was darkening along his jaw. Leonard stood behind him holding a pistol, a triumphant snarl twisting his face. Senator Ashford descended the staircase slowly, savoring each step like a judge approaching an executioner's block. His robe billowed behind him, his eyes cold with the kind of rage that could only be fueled by wounded pride. "You," he hissed, pointing at Gabriel. "You dare trespass into my wife's private rooms. You dare put your hands where they do not belong." Gabriel said nothing. His silence was not submission. It was defiance. Leonard seized Gabriel's arm and forced him to his knees. "Look at him, Senator," Leonard crowed. "I told you he was trouble. I told you he had ideas above his station." Ashford's gaze narrowed. "And you have proof? Witnesses?" "I seen it with my own eyes," Leonard lied smoothly. "He's been meeting the mistress at night, slipping into the music room, touching her." Catherine broke through the stunned servants and shoved her way to the front. "That's a lie!" she shouted, voice shaking with fury. "He never touched me inappropriately. He never—" Ashford whirled to face her. "Silence." One word, sharp as a blade. She flinched instinctively, but for the first time she did not back down. "You will not harm him," she said, stepping between them. "This is madness." But Ashford was beyond reason. "Step aside," he ordered. "Your behavior will be addressed later. For now, I will deal with him." "He saved my life," Catherine cried. "He's done nothing wrong." Leonard laughed harshly. "Maybe he did more than save you, ma'am. Maybe he got a taste of—" Gabriel lunged, fury igniting in his eyes. Leonard struck him across the face with the pistol. Gabriel crumpled, breath knocked from him, but still did not break. The sight of him bleeding on her marble floor shattered something inside Catherine. "William," she whispered, voice trembling with a fear she could no longer contain. "Stop. Please, for God's sake, stop." Ashford's face twisted with something darker than rage. "You plead for him?" Catherine realized her mistake even before the words left his lips. "You plead for a slave." He stepped closer. "What has happened between you two?" She shook her head desperately. "Nothing. Nothing improper. Don't lie to me," he roared. Thunder exploded overhead. Then Ashford turned to Leonard. "Take him to the stables. We'll deal with him privately before dawn. No one must see." The command hit Catherine like a whip. "No!" she screamed, grabbing Ashford's arm. "Don't you dare!" He shoved her so hard she fell to the floor. Gabriel snarled and tried to stand, but Leonard jammed the pistol barrel against his temple. "Move!" Leonard spat. Two guards dragged Gabriel toward the side door. His eyes found Catherine's as he struggled to breathe past the pain. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. "Not for being caught, not for loving her, for failing to protect her from this moment." "Gabriel," Catherine sobbed, crawling toward him. Ashford grabbed her by the hair and hauled her to her feet. "Look at me," he growled into her face. "Tell me the truth. Has he touched you? Has he tainted you?" Her heart pounded, her lungs burned, and she realized there was no lie that could save them both. So she told the truth. "He is innocent," she whispered. "But I'm not." Silence swallowed the room. Servants froze. Lightning illuminated the horror twisting Ashford's face. Gabriel closed his eyes, grief, pride, love passing through him in a single breath. Catherine lifted her chin. "I love him." Ashford's world shattered. His pride collapsed into something monstrous. "You shame me," he whispered, voice shaking. "You shame yourself." Then, with deadly calm, "Tonight, one of you dies." Catherine screamed again, but Ashford shoved her back. She fell against the banister, breath knocked out of her. Leonard smirked and dragged Gabriel toward the courtyard. Thunder drowned out her cries. Lightning illuminated the moment Gabriel was thrown into the mud. And Catherine realized the truth. If she didn't move now, Gabriel would die before sunrise. She surged to her feet, heart slamming against her ribs, mind racing. She had one chance, one weapon, one secret William Ashford never imagined she would dare use. The key to the senator's private office, and inside that office, the papers that could destroy him, the papers that could save Gabriel's life. Catherine ran. She didn't feel the bruises. She didn't feel the pain. She felt only the fire in her veins, a fire that would burn down Savannah before she let them take the man she loved. Rain hammered the courtyard like fists from heaven when Catherine burst through the back doors, soaked instantly, hair plastered to her cheeks. She clutched the leather folder she had stolen from William's private office. His ledger of bribes, illegal trade manifests, names of senators bought like cattle, the only weapon powerful enough to stop a murder. Lightning tore the sky open, illuminating the horror before her. Gabriel knelt in the mud beneath the magnolia tree, hands bound behind him, chest rising and falling in ragged, painful breaths. Leonard stood behind him with a rope, looping it over a low branch. Guards surrounded them, their faces grim, indifferent, and William Ashford, her husband, held a pistol aimed at Gabriel's heart. "William!" Catherine screamed, slipping in the mud as she ran. "Stop this!" He didn't turn. Rain streaked down his face like war paint. "It ends tonight," he said, "before the city hears of this disgrace." Catherine stumbled to a halt several feet away, breath shuddering, clutching the ledger to her chest. "I won't let you kill him," she said. Ashford laughed bitterly. "You think you have a choice after admitting your sin?" Lightning flashed. "I have proof," she said. raising the ledger with trembling hands. "Of every crime you've ever committed. Your illegal slave imports, your bribes, your forged signatures, your stolen funds. If Gabriel dies tonight, this becomes public. You will hang before he does." Ashford's smile vanished. "Impossible," he whispered. Catherine opened the ledger, letting a page flap in the storm wind. "Your handwriting, your seal, your accounts, all of it. Every sin you've committed in the name of your honor." Leonard cursed under his breath. One of the guards shifted nervously. Ashford's mask cracked. "You would destroy me," he said, voice trembling with disbelief. "Your husband." "You destroyed yourself," she replied. "Long before tonight." Silence. Only the storm answered. Catherine took a step closer, the ledger still raised. "Let him go," she said softly. "Exile yourself quietly. Leave Georgia forever, and no one will ever see these documents." Ashford looked at Gabriel. Bleeding, kneeling, unbroken. He looked at Catherine, soaked, shivering, fierce. Then something in him collapsed. "Cut him down," he ordered hoarsely. Leonard froze. "Senator, do it," Ashford roared. Leonard's jaw tightened, but he sliced the rope and shoved Gabriel harshly. Gabriel stumbled, catching himself before he fell face first in the mud. Ashford pointed a shaking finger at Catherine. "You will curse the day you betrayed me," he said. "I will leave Savannah, but I will never forgive." Catherine met his gaze with cold, exhausted clarity. "I stopped needing your forgiveness the day you stopped being a husband." Ashford turned, coat whipping behind him, and stormed into the night. Leonard followed, defeated fury simmering beneath his skin. Finally, they were gone. Catherine collapsed to her knees beside Gabriel, hands shaking as she reached for him. "Gabriel," she whispered, voice breaking, "are you hurt? Please, look at me." He lifted his eyes, dark, steady, alive. "You saved me," he breathed. "No," she sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "You saved me first." The storm softened. Their breaths mingled in the cool, wet air. "We have to leave Savannah," Gabriel whispered. "Tonight, before he changes his mind." She nodded. "Yes, wherever you go, I go." He leaned into her touch, gentle, reverent. "We'll live," he murmured. "We'll find freedom. We'll build a life they said we couldn't. And we'll raise our child free," she whispered. A flicker of hope lit Gabriel's eyes. In the courtyard where death had waited minutes before, they rose together, muddy, bruised, trembling, but alive. Together, they stepped into the storm, not running from death, running toward life. Narrator: the story is over, but the pain of that era still resonates. How are you feeling right now? Are you listening to this story alone or with someone? Share your feelings and where you are right now.